So the topic for tonight is science and faith. Is there a conflict? And the answer, just to let you know, the answer is no, but there is tension. And I'll explain why and what that means. My name is Adam Humphreys. You can call me Reverend, but I don't tend to respond to that. I list my various degrees up there as a way of showing that I've done a lot of study, and the more I study, the more I realise I don't know as much as I wish I did. And often it's those who don't know much who think they know more than they actually do. And having been at university for quite a long time, I've learned there's still a lot more I can understand. So I loved science as a teenager and science fiction. So I used to like reading Star Trek, watching Star Trek, watching sci-fi on TV, reading books on the bus so I didn't have to talk to people. And I went to university and studied science. I did a double degree, actually, a science degree and an arts degree. And during that first year, I met some Christians who explained the gospel to me and challenged me to think about the Bible, to think about God. And I was quite resistant at the start. I would have called myself an atheist in my first year of uni. And I thought that science explained everything we need to know about the world and religion was pointless and Christianity was just for gullible people. I did become a Christian, and that was mostly through getting to know these other Christians, talking to them about faith, starting to read the Bible for myself, realising that I hadn't actually understood what the Bible really teaches, what it means to believe in God. And it was arguments about morality, about how the Bible fits together and we can trust the Bible. And the key thing was understanding the resurrection, looking at the evidence for that. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? And it was understanding that kind of tipped me over the edge. That when I went, yep, the resurrection, I think that actually really happened. But if that is possible, if that happened, then that means God must be real. And then God knows what I'm like, what I think, what is in my heart. And I realised I needed to say sorry to God. So I went on to finish my degree and tried to do as many different science subjects as I could to figure out what sort of science I wanted to do. So I did biochemistry, genetics, astronomy, biology, chemistry, did I say astronomy? Microbiology, a whole heap of different subjects to figure out which one I was most interested in, and ended up focusing on biochemistry. I really enjoyed that. More the molecular biology side of that. So how does the cell work? How does the different components of the human cell fit together to make it do what it needs to do? So after I finished my undergrad, I did 3 years work in a laboratory at La Trobe as a scientist, working as a biochemist, doing research and basically a lab assistant. I was able to get my name on 2 papers that were published from labs I was working in. And one of those papers, I was the first author, which is a big deal if you're a scientist, to be able to get your name at the start of the list of names. So that was pretty exciting to be able to do that. And while I was at uni, I set up a science and faith group. And there were different undergrads and postgrads and postdocs working at La Trobe. We would meet together once a month and just talk through different issues of science and faith. So I've been thinking about these issues for a long time and how to fit belief in God, but also understanding what we learn from science, how to fit those two things together. But the thing that might surprise you is that the conflict between science and faith didn't become a problem for me until after I was a Christian. So as a Christian, before I was a Christian, the issues were more about, is the Bible reliable? Does it make sense? Does it speak to my life? Will it make a difference following Jesus? After I became a Christian, people started saying, hey, but you're studying all these things in your science classes, they don't actually fit with the Bible. And basically people were training me to see a conflict, pushing me to admit there's actually issues here. And so I believed it. And I kind of freaked out a bit. And so I had to start doing my own research and investigation and talk to people to try and get my head around this. And after many years, I've come to see that there are issues, conflicts do break out, but often it's because we misunderstand what's really going on, what science teaches, what the Bible teaches. So while there is tension, the conflict is not because of science and faith, it's usually because of us and how we approach issues. So what is tonight about? Well, it's showing that science and faith are not enemies, showing that there is tension but not conflict. We're going to define some terms. What do we mean by science and faith? And also we're going to be looking at how to support youth in the church. What are we not going to do? We're not going to solve every problem, as lovely as that would be. That's not going to happen tonight. And also we're not going to be debating origins. I think when we start talking about science and faith, we always go straight to, this is about creation and evolution. And that's what it's all about, that's what it's only about, and that's where we've got to get down and fight. We're not doing that tonight. We're looking at big picture stuff, how to approach this issue. What I want to do for a while now is look at the idea of the conflict between science and faith and to show that it's actually a myth that there's conflict. There's a myth that Christianity attacks science and a myth that science attacks Christianity, and that they are enemies always opposing each other. Now, has there been attacks of Christianity upon science? Yes, there have been. There have been issues, but a lot of the stories that we know aren't really true. They're actually myths. They're things that people have made up to try and discredit Christianity, to try and perpetuate this supposed conflict. So you probably all know the story about Christopher Columbus, who tried to sail around the globe. He wanted to find a shortcut from England to India. And he figured that he could sail, rather than going one direction, he'd go in the other direction, go around the world, because the world, in his mind, was a globe and not flat. So the story goes that the church opposed this, because the church believed that the Bible clearly taught that the world is flat and you cannot sail around it, and that Columbus was going to not only sail off the edge of the earth, but he was actually trying to undermine the church and attack the church. And so the church was trying to stop him from going on his voyage. Now, have you ever heard something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's actually completely made up. Well, first of all, you say the Bible doesn't teach that the earth is flat. And we can talk about that later if you've got questions about that. But at the time of Columbus, we're talking the 15th century, nobody believed that the earth was flat. They all believed the earth was a globe and had done so for centuries. Even the ancient Greeks, before the time of Jesus, believed the earth was a globe or a sphere. In fact, the big problem that the church had was that Columbus had underestimated how big the earth was, and they knew that he wouldn't be able to sail all the way from England to India. The fact that America was in the middle was what saved him. Otherwise, he would have died. Also, Columbus was a devout Christian. He believed it was his calling from God to explore and to sail. I couldn't find any evidence to back this up, but I've read that the church even put missionaries on this boat because they believed that it could potentially be a successful mission. So where did this story come from? Well, it was actually made up in the 1800s as a way to discredit Christianity and to invent a conflict story. There was a man who wrote a fictional work about this, and he promoted this story. There was a guy who was trying to set up a university. The guy was trying to start up a university, and he'd been opposed by Christians in this, and so he wanted to strike back at the Christians. And so he wrote a book that talked about the long conflict between science and Christianity. And he actually made up stuff about Columbus as a way to build his case that we should get the church, Christianity, out of universities. Another myth is that about Galileo. I'm sure you've all heard about him as well. And the story goes that the church believed that the Bible taught that the earth is at the centre of the universe. You've got the earth with the sun and the moon, and the planets and the stars all going around the earth. In fact, you even had the celestial sphere that the stars were on. And so this great big sphere that the earth was inside, and it rotated around, and the earth was stationary at the middle. And so Galileo opposed that. He said, no, actually the sun is at the centre of the universe, and the earth and everything else revolves around the sun. And so the church is supposed to have found that to be heresy and a real problem, and they opposed Galileo and ended up condemning as a heretic. Some people would say having him killed for that, or at the very least arrested and thrown in jail for that. Now, this is mostly false, but there are some tricky bits in it, some challenging bits even for Christians. So the Bible doesn't teach that the earth is at the centre of the universe, but it was actually a common belief for many cultures for thousands of years. And unfortunately, what the church had done, rather than reading their Bibles closely, they'd actually taken Aristotle's view of the world and then shown how that fit with the Bible. So Aristotle's an ancient Greek philosopher at the kind of birth of the Renaissance and just before the Reformation. All of these ancient texts, these Greek texts, have been discovered. Not only were they Greek manuscripts of the Bible, which helped lead to the Reformation, but also the writings of these Greek scholars and philosophers. And so medieval Europe had rediscovered these documents and were reading them, and they loved Aristotle. Now, he was not a scientist, he was a philosopher. He reasoned his things, his theories. He was followed the path of more deductivism rather than inductivism, and he hypothesised the way the world works and how everything's set up. And so the church went, this is great, and we want to be respectable. People love Aristotle at the moment, so we want to show that Aristotle fits with the Bible. And so what Galileo did was he didn't attack the church, he didn't attack the Bible, he actually challenged the Aristotelian view of the universe. But because the church had wedded itself to this ancient model, an attack on the model was seen as an attack on the church or an attack on the Bible. Now, there are many people in the church who are actually quite okay with Galileo promoting his views. A lot of them supported it. It wasn't a problem, except he decided to make a big deal about it. And he wrote a book, I think it's Dialogues Concerning Two Chief Models, something like that. And the style that he used was having dialogue partners. And there were three characters who were talking about these different models. And there's a guy called Simplicio. And he basically just spouted the views of the Pope at the time. And he was seen as the guy who backed the Aristotelian model that was a bit outdated and silly. And so Galileo's problem was not about the science, it was about the politics. And how he opposed the Pope, embarrassed and humiliated the Pope. Now, he wasn't executed, but he was arrested and he was under house arrest, and he faced some different issues because of that. But again, Galileo was a devout Christian. And so the conflict, though, was not about the Bible, it was about different views of the world. But again, it's one of those things we get told, that the church persecuted Galileo, they killed him, he was a martyr for science. It's just not true. It's an exaggeration of the facts. So has Christianity attacked science? Well, yes and no. But there are some uncomfortable truths for unbelievers. Much of the conflict has actually been made up. The story has been made up. A really great book on this is Rodney Stark's For the Glory of God. Second chapter, big chapter, is all about the origins of science and showing how a lot of these things we believe today were made up. Also, science originated once in human history, and that was in Christian Europe. It's another thing Stark points about. No other culture developed science. It only developed in Europe, in Christian Europe. And it was actually Christian belief that enabled this development. So this next slide's got some quotes. Stark says, Christianity depicted God as a rational, responsive, dependable and omnipotent being, and the universe as his personal creation, thus having a rational, lawful, stable structure awaiting human comprehension. You can read the other quotes as well, but Stark's point is that it was only the Christian worldview, only the Christian view of a rational God that enabled people to go out and do the study of nature that helped them to develop science. You think about pagan ideas, you've got different gods who are sending the rain because they're unhappy, who are causing the seasons based on weird rituals and rhythms. If that's how the world works, then you can't actually make sense of it. You can't predict, you can't come up with scientific theories. And so it's only the Christian view of God that enabled science to develop. Just to go back to the previous slide for a second. There are some uncomfortable truths for unbelievers. The third one there is faith is reasonable and Christians can be highly intelligent. And often the conflict story is you've got the highly intelligent people like Galileo who are just wonderful, kind, generous, smart, observant people, and then you've got the Bible-thumping imbeciles in the church who wouldn't be able to tell their left foot from their right foot. But it's simply not true. It's an uncomfortable truth that there are many highly intelligent Christians who are even scientists. But there are some uncomfortable truths for believers. The church has sometimes misread the Bible. And the church has sometimes been too passionate in adopting contemporary views of the world that end up being rejected. Every age thinks, this new idea that's come about, this is the truth, this is the final word on this topic. And so we better see how we can make the Bible fit this view so we don't look dumb, so we don't look backwards and old-fashioned. But then when the next view comes along, the next understanding of the world comes along, those Christians look like fools. And often what you'll have is, maybe the next generation, their kids say, they're just our parents, they were fundamentalists, they didn't quite understand the world, they're a bit dumb, but we're enlightened. And so not only does it set up this perpetual cycle of Christians wedding their Bible, their worldview to changing scientific theories, it also sets up this conflict within the church itself between generations and different groups. And so we just got to be careful, patient at times, just wait to see how things unfold. So there's this myth that Christianity has attacked science, that Christianity has blocked science at every point. It's simply not true. A quote on the previous slide says that it was actually Anglican ministers in past centuries who were kind of overpaid and underworked, had a lot of spare time on their hands. They actually did a lot of the scientific work in the early days. Now what about the reverse? Has science attacked Christianity? Now there is, again, evidence, example of science attacking Christianity, but sometimes we can present it as science has defeated Christianity. Science has victory over Christianity. And we can overstate the case there. So it's important to see that there are myths here as well about what science has and hasn't done. And so one of the big ones is that science proves miracles can't occur. David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, wrote a book on miracles, and he said that we are looking at evidence. And take, for example, someone rising up from the dead. We have so many counterexamples of people coming back to life that it's actually impossible to believe that someone could come back to life. He's basically saying when you approach with a scientific worldview or mindset to look at miracles, we have all these counterexamples to prove that miracles can't occur. Now, there are lots of flaws in Hume's thinking, but it's really influenced people. People have this kind of idea that because we don't see miracles happening all the time, miracles therefore don't exist. I should just pray to God and a miracle should happen and that should prove that God exists, but because miracles don't happen, therefore God's not real, Christianity's not real, and science has proven that. But science may be able to discredit specific claims of miraculous events. So I might say, I've performed a miracle and I've helped someone's amputated leg to grow back. Well, science could actually investigate that, couldn't it? You could employ the scientific methods and medical research perhaps to show that maybe I was just making it up. But science can't rule miracles out altogether. Maybe specific cases, but it can't say that miracles are impossible. And science can't easily investigate the miracles in the Bible. You can't actually go back in time and look at what happened. You can't interview people. All we have is the Bible to go on. So this taps into the question of, well, what is science? What is faith? What are the limits of them? We'll get to that in a minute. Another myth is that science explains how the world works, and so we don't need Christianity. The thing is, though, science can't tell us everything about the world. Science has its limits. But also, the Bible is not primarily concerned with explaining how the world works. We often take it as humans looked around the world and went, why do the trees grow? Why does fruit appear on the trees? What causes the wind? What causes the tides? And so people invent this idea of gods. The gods make it happen. And people turn to the Bible and say, well, that's what the Bible is. The Bible is basically a supernatural explanation for why the world is the way it is. But now science explains the way the world is, so we don't need God, we don't need the Bible, we don't need Christianity. Just for a bit of a break, we're going to play a video now to show how this worldview is presented in a recent Disney movie. So enjoy.
So what I believe you were trying to say is thank you.
Thank you?
You're welcome.
What? No. I didn't. I wasn't. Why would I ever say anything?
I see what's happening, yeah. You're face to face with greatness and it's strange. You don't even know how you feel. It's adorable. Well, it's nice to see that humans never change. Open your eyes, let's begin. Yes, it's really me, it's Maui, breathe it in. I know it's a lot, the hair, the bod. When you're staring at a demigod, what can I say except you're welcome? For the tides, the sun, the sky. Hey, it's okay, you're welcome. I'm just an ordinary demigod. Hey, what has two thumbs and pulled up the sky? When you were wilding yay high, this guy. When the nights got cold, who stole you? Fire from down below. Look at that, yo! Oh, also I lasso the sun. Come to stretch your days and bring you fun. Also I harness the breeze. You're welcome to build your sails and shake your trees. So what can I say except you're welcome? For the islands I pulled from the sea. There's no need to pray, it's okay, you're welcome. I guess it's just my way of being me. You're welcome, you're welcome. Well, come to think of it, honestly I could go on and on. I can explain every natural phenomenon. The tide, the grass, the ground, oh that was Maui just messing around. I killed a hill, I buried its guts, sprouted a tree, now you got coconuts. What's the lesson, what does it take away? Don't mess with Maui when you don't have my going. And the tapestry here in my skin is a map of the victories I win. Where I did, I make everything happen. Look at that, even you mountain. Well, anyway, let me say you're welcome for the wonderful world you know. Hey, it's okay, you're welcome. Well, come with me, baby, I gotta go. Hey, it's okay, say you're welcome. 'Cause I'm gonna need that note. I'm saying away, you're welcome. 'Cause now I can do anything but go. And thank you!
Seems like a cool guy.
So if you've seen Moana,
No, I haven't.
We've just met there Maui, the demigod. And what did he do in the past? Pulled the islands out of the ocean, he created the breeze, he brought fire to the humans, he lassoed the sun to lengthen the days so they can have fun. And so Maui is presented as the explanation for the way the world is. But would you bother looking at things like weather predictions? Would you bother trying to understand the movement of the sun and the stars in the sky? Would you bother investigating horticulture and how do plants actually grow? Where do they come from? With that kind of worldview, you wouldn't develop science, would you? Because what's your answer? Why is the world the way it is? Because Maui. And we know that that's how so many cultures present their worldview. The ancient Greeks, a lot of those myths and stories are about why is the world the way it is. We've actually found ancient Near Eastern texts from Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Sumeria, all these ancient texts that talk about where did the ocean come from. It's because this god slayed his mother and she became the ocean, and gods burst out of each other's heads, and the humans were created out of the blood of the gods to be slaves for the gods to do the work because the gods were tired of working. And so the descriptions we get in these other cultures, these other religions are fantastical, aren't they? And they're not the sort of worldviews that would lead to a rational, ordered understanding of the universe. But the Bible is nothing like that. The Bible actually convinces us, or tries to convince us, that the world is ordered, God is rational, that God is separate from the world, but he's still involved in the world, and he holds it up, he makes everything work. And so really science is just the study of God's regular activity. You can see this is a very different way of thinking about science, thinking about the Bible. And so it shows a great lack of understanding to say, well, science has explained how the world works, therefore we don't need faith. As if faith is what you do when you don't know something. But the Christian idea of faith is we believe something because we do know things. We do have evidence, we do have the Bible, we do have God's revelation, he's spoken to us, and we look at the facts, we look at the evidence and go, this makes sense, I'm going to trust that God is real, I'm going to believe in God. So how does science fit in with that? Science is looking at how God operates, how he does things. And so it's actually completely backwards to say God is an ordered, rational God. We don't expect him to be visible in creation. It's not that if you go out at night, you'll see God pulling the flowers up out of the ground with his hands. It's not that if you look really closely, you can see.
So what I believe you were trying to say is...
It's not that you can see God's hand pushing the sun across the sky. We don't expect to see God. And so that's how science has proceeded for centuries. But it's ridiculous to then say, well, because we haven't seen God, therefore God doesn't exist. The whole foundation of science was that we don't see God. We're actually seeing the effects of his work in the world, his ordered work of making everything function the way it's supposed to. And so then at the end of that to say, we've never seen God, therefore God doesn't exist, is to ignore and misunderstand how science came to be. So Francis Bacon, he was early on in the development of the scientific method. He was also a Christian. He said, there are two books laid before us to study to prevent our falling into error. First, the volume of the Scriptures, which reveal the will of God, then the volume of the creatures, which express his power. So if God has created the world and God has written the Bible, if they are the two things that reveal who he is, then they shouldn't contradict, right? There shouldn't be conflict. So on the one hand, we can confidently say that a Christian can embrace science and faith. You don't have to choose between the two. But on the other hand, we need to be ready to admit that there is still tension. So what is the issue? If we don't have to choose one or the other, then what is the issue? Well, often we're just poor at defining what we mean by science and faith. Also, we employ them beyond their limits. We make the Bible say things that God didn't intend it to say. Or we make science say things that science can't actually say. But I think one of the big issues is we don't like tension. We want everything to be neat and orderly. But as you know, reading your Bible, there's always new things you're learning. And so you can understand the core of the Bible to become a Christian. But there's always more to learn. There's always more growing to it. It's the same as science. We know things, but there's still more to learn. And I think as we continue to understand the Bible better and understand the natural world better, we will see more and more agreement. But that will just take time. And so we've just got to deal with that tension. So let's get into some quick definitions. What is science? Well, it's the systematic study and knowledge of physical and natural phenomena. That's not often how we use the word science, is it? We often use science to mean the application of science. Science took us to the moon. Well, science didn't take us to the moon. Rockets took us to the moon. Or we might even talk about people who do science. Science tells us UV rays cause skin cancer. Well, science doesn't tell us that. Scientists who have done scientific investigation tell us that. But also, we sometimes use the word science to actually mean a materialist, naturalist, rationalist worldview. Science got us out of the Dark Ages. And so when we use the phrase science says, we've got to be thinking, are we talking about the evidence says? Or the way the evidence is interpreted says? Or scientists who have a particular worldview and are trying to bring their atheism in, they say. What are we actually talking about? And often we're just so confused. Well, what is faith then? Well, Richard Dawkins says faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate science. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Let's say Richard Dawkins has never actually listened to a Christian and he's never actually read the Bible, which I'm sure you probably say, yeah, he hasn't really read the Bible. But when the God Delusion came out a few years ago, Richard Dawkins and the rest of the new atheists were pushing really hard that faith is not about trust. Faith is what you do when you have no evidence. How do you know that God exists? Well, I don't know. I just have faith. How do you know that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, there is no evidence. I just have faith. If I had evidence, I wouldn't need to have faith. That's not how the Bible uses faith. That's not how Christians use faith. Faith is, in the Bible, trusting in God's promises. You can see that quote there from Galatians. Consider Abraham. He believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness.